Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's uh, edition of the Humanities in Class webinar series. In fact, this is the first one for the 2018-19 academic year, and we're very, very pleased that you could join us for Edison versus Tesla, the myth and style and technological history with Bernie Carlson from the University of Virginia. My name is Andy Mink, and I'm the Vice President of Education Programs at the National Humanities Center. I've added my Twitter handle and my email on the screen. Please don't ever hesitate to contact me with thoughts or feedback or different kinds of ideas that you might have for our webinar series. I always enjoy doing these. This is sort of a start of the school year. It feels to me when we start launching these webinars, and we do them weekly until about middle of December, and then again weekly after the holidays until the end of April. And in my view, it's a really compelling and interesting way to connect you, the audience, teachers, people in their classroom, folks who are standing in front of kids just today, in interesting conversations with lead scholars and experts like Bernie around really interesting and compelling topics. So hopefully we can do all those things for you tonight. And I very much want to acknowledge and recognize that all of you have had a busy day. In fact, I'm sure all of you are back at school in some form or fashion, even if your students aren't back. And if you feel some sort of sense of relief and even smugness from Southern California, I've noticed that our Los Angeles teachers are looking forward to the 4-day weekend that starts tomorrow. So again, we acknowledge that you're spending your own private time with us in this professional development. Tonight's webinar, which is hosted in the Go to Training webinar platform, is going to be a conversation between you and Bernie. The readings and the associated PowerPoint that he's developed will give you an anchor and a set of primary sources to refer to, but it's really the conversation that we're the most interested in. And that conversation will happen through the chat box at the very bottom of your Go to Training control panel. So if you open that up, you'll see your name and you'll be able to greet everyone else in the room. You can maybe introduce yourself and where you're from. It's also a place to register thoughts and feedback and answer questions that Bernie might be posing to you. I'll also be mining. My job tonight is to mine that and see your questions and insert them into Bernie's talk when the time seems appropriate. If for some reason you ask a question and we just don't get to it and it starts to scroll up and we lose it, please don't hesitate to type it in again or to private message me, and I'll make sure that it gets asked before we're done. I have turned off all of your microphones, so we cannot hear your audio, but we can see your chat. It's very active, and that's a way for us to collect and to archive the conversation that we'll be having. I'm really pleased as well to start our webinar series with our professional organization partnership with the National Council for History Education. NCHE is very close to my own personal professional heart. I'm on the current board of directors and have been for about 7 years, and I believe very strongly in the kind of work that NCHE does to support history educators across the country, developing a strong colloquial model of being advocates for history as a necessary and important discipline that we teach at all levels. I'm really pleased too to be able to introduce Justin Jakovich, who's joined us from his home in Ohio, to tell us just a little bit about NCHE and in particular the way that we've developed this partnership and these series of webinars around technology in American history. Hey Justin, can you hear me?
Sure can, Andy. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Andy, for the nice introduction. I appreciate it. The National Council for History Education is really excited to be able to bring you this webinar in partnership with the National Humanities Center. This is being led by Bernie Carlson, who is our lead scholar for our Technology's Impact in American History program that we've been conducting for the last 2 years with the support of the Library of Congress, Teaching with Primary Sources program. So super pleased to be able to introduce you to some of the work that Bernie's been sharing with our folks via professional development programs, via our colloquia. He presented this tonight's presentation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office program that we did back in March in Alexandria, Virginia. We have a series of those in-person professional development programs coming back around, the first of which will be in January at the Kennedy Space Center. So take a look at NCHE's website, www.nche.net, for registration details for that program and more to come. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office hasn't been scheduled yet, but it'll come back around next April. And we'll also do one more professional development program in 2019 at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center. On top of that, we also have a national conference every year. That'll take place in 2019 from March 14th through 16th. So we welcome each and every one of you to attend. After this evening's program, you will all have membership in NCHE for a year. So you'll be able to sign up for the conference as members, and you'll start seeing materials over the next coming weeks. So without further ado, and to get to the good stuff, I will hand this back over to Andy, but we really appreciate the partnership and your time this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that short summary, and I want to sort of underscore at least one major point that you made right at the very end, which is all of our attendees at tonight's webinar will be granted a year-long and annual membership into NCHE, and that gives you access to a wide variety of materials and resources, both online and in person. Justin will be in touch with you via the email that you used to sign up for tonight's webinar to extend that offer. And I would love to be able to meet many of you in DC, in Washington, DC at the national conference next spring. Thanks, Justin. The National Humanities Center is located in Durham, North Carolina, and we are in now our 4th decade of service to the humanities. The building in front of you is the center itself, and on Tuesday of next week, we'll welcome our 41st cohort of university professors who will come in fellowship. They come from universities all over the country. They study all humanities disciplines, and they're selected from an application pool to come and do their good work for an entire year. So every day they walk through that door and they find their own study and they do their own research, or they write their own book, or they do editing, or they do different kinds of digital projects. And really the goal of the education programs then is to extend bridges from that world to your world. And in my mind, the metaphor of the bridge is really meant to be two-way. It's not just us sharing and making available scholarship and a deeper understanding of topics. It's also a chance to really explore pedagogical innovation, to really think about best practices in the classroom, both at the K-12 and the university level, and to try to align and advocate for the humanities as a critical and necessary tool in the world that we live in and the citizenry that we're teaching. It's important to us, I think, to make sure that the humanities become not just something we do when we've learned to read and learned how to subtract and add, but rather it's a way to understand the world. It's a blueprint that's been given to us by humanists all before us in order to make sense of this very complicated world that we live in. For that reason, we make all of our materials free and online. You can visit our instructional resources and lessons on our website and find collections of primary sources, essays written by scholars, and lessons that have been vetted and edited by scholars. You can also participate in the webinar series as you are tonight. The webinar series, I think we have 24 scheduled this year. We generally reach capacity at 200 participants per session. So I would encourage you at some point relatively soon to go in and take a look at the rest of the fall schedule and sign up for any session that feels interesting to you. Then in November, we'll open the registration for the spring portion of our webinar series. I also want to mention that there are other instructional resources on our website available to you. We have a podcast series that provides an audio opportunity for, again, lead scholars and master teachers to reflect on the process of doing the humanities, of understanding the humanities, and of acknowledging and recognizing those resources that are the most relevant for the humanities classroom. We've also started an online course series, and our first online course, Digital Literacy in the Classroom, which starts just next week, in fact, is at capacity. We are, however, scheduling a second session. So if you go and register, we'll put you on the waiting list and then immediately put you in that second session, which I think should start probably in late October. Our goal with this course and the other courses we're developing currently is to offer 4 or 5 or 6 simultaneously throughout the year. And this would give you an opportunity to not just have, as we will tonight, a 90-minute conversation, but rather a 5-week immersive learning experience around some compelling topic. So right now, digital literacy in the classroom is available. And if you're interested in ways that the humanities help us make sense in the digital age, help us become more active, critical consumers of information, I would encourage you to sign up for that as well. The National Humanities Center has published a series of digital textbooks. You can find these both online on iTunes and download those to your Apple devices or our website, which will give you access to non-Apple product materials. And then finally, we do a lot of face-to-face work as well. If you are anywhere close to Durham, North Carolina on September 29th, we'd love to have you join us for an archival workshop on how to better understand and position the Caribbean in world history. And in particular, we're going to look at the transatlantic slave trade and the role of Barbados in the Caribbean, and then the Caribbean in the world. So this is a full-day symposium that we'll host at the center in Durham, and it'll be led in part by a good friend and colleague, Andrew Payne from the National Archives in London, as well as several other scholars on the topic. So if you're interested in that, please go to our website and find the registration. So having said that, we are really here to talk to Bernie. And when our session is over at 8:30 p.m. East Coast time, you will receive documentation of your attendance and participation. There'll be a short survey that we'll ask you to fill out, and then you'll be able to download your certificate. Sometimes this takes a little while. You know, with the busy cyber world that we live in, it takes maybe an hour or so to get to your email box. If for some reason it doesn't, you can email me tomorrow, and my colleague Libby Taylor and I will find a way to get that to you. So that's my introduction, my reorientation of the National Humanities Center, and my welcome back to our session tonight. I'm very pleased to be able to reintroduce Bernie Carlson from the University of Virginia as our lead speaker tonight. Bernie's a good friend and a colleague from UVA. You may also notice, if you've attended a lot of our webinars, that he probably does more webinars for us every year than anyone else, and that's in large part because of this project we do with NCHE. But each time we hope to really explore different connecting places where technology and science and the humanities intersect. And I'd encourage both you, and I certainly will, try to push Bernie to help us see and make visible those connections so we can better understand them. So Bernie, I'm going to take a moment to step aside. I'm going to unmute you. Hey, Bernie, can you hear me? And I'm going to give you the mouse. Bernie, are you there? Hello, Bernie. Bernie, you might need to unmute yourself as well. There you go.
I am now also unmuted. So
there you are. Hey, Bernie, how are you?
All 93 that are. I'm fine, thank you. So I am very glad to be joining all of you tonight from all over the country. 93 of what I hope will, at the end of the day, be either Tesla or Edison fans, and we should have some fun this evening. I am, by way of background, a historian of technology. I have been working in the area of American history and technology for the last 30 years. And as you can see up on the screen, I am also a professor in the engineering school at the University of Virginia. So I live in the best of both possible worlds. I get to interact with colleagues in history and engage with engineering students and develop their writing, communications, and entrepreneurial skills. I've written a couple of books. Much of what I'm going to talk about tonight comes from the first book you see there on the screen, my biography of Tesla called Inventor of the Electrical Age, which came out in 2013. And it was great fun to do, and I spent about 15 years working on it. What I want to do tonight with you folks is talk a little bit about some of the conceptual tools that I learned while studying Nikola Tesla and comparing him with his rival and nemesis, Thomas Edison. And one of those concepts is the notion of technological style. Another is really ideology, and by ideology here I mean the set of beliefs that people have as to why they do what they do with technology. And as you'll see, it's an interesting exercise to get at those particular concepts. I want to borrow, leverage, take advantage of a piece of popular culture, which is a rap video that was done by the rap video folks. And let's see here.
Bernie, I'm sorry.
You got to hop in here and tell me.
Yeah, Bernie, I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment, just to make sure that we're going to get our slides aligned. So it feels to me like your mouse may not be working appropriately. I can see it moving, but I'm not seeing it advance your slides. So you tell me where you'd like to be. You'd like to be right here?
No, not yet. Go back. Let's see. Yeah, we can stay right there. Yeah, This is
Okay.
the one that threw me off, which is I didn't know that one was going to show up. But let's stay with Tesla and popular culture. So there have been lots of different ways that Tesla has appeared in popular culture, and the one that we want to talk about tonight are the epic rap videos in history, which were produced by Lloyd Alquist and Peter Shukoff. And they frequently show, how history can be a clash of two powerful personalities. And Alquist and Shukoff have done one on Jobs versus Gates, Thomas Jefferson versus Alexander Hamilton, Aristotle versus Plato. But one that I, of course, have been pretty interested in is the one that they did in season 2 on Thomas Edison versus Nikola Tesla. And I think it's an interesting opportunity for us to do a couple things as teachers. One is to show students how to enjoy, but also critically understand the underpinnings of something like a rap video of this sort. And it's also an interesting way of getting students to think about their values and what they think is important in terms of technology. And Tesla has appeared in popular culture in a variety of ways. Some of you may know that he's been popularized by David Bowie, who played Tesla in the full-length Hollywood movie The Prestige, and he's also been made popular via Matt Inman, who does an online comic strip called The Oatmeal. But in addition to those things, Tesla has in recent years showed up as a central character in a video game called Dark Void. Some of your students may be playing that. And he has been involved in a variety of Kickstarter campaigns, including one campaign that raised $125,000 to erect a statue of Tesla in Silicon Valley. And of course, let's not forget about the fact that Elon Musk has appropriated Tesla's, at least his name, in order to use that as his new make of car, the Tesla car. So Tesla in popular culture, he's important, he's central. Our students are hearing about him in a variety of ways. But let's have a listen to what the history rap guys have to say about Edison and Tesla.
Okay, and Bernie, let me cue this up for our audience as well.
Sure.
First of all, I appreciate everyone's patience. This is the first day of school and the first class of the first day, and I feel like it's going well, and our PowerPoint will be made available to you. I've also recorded tonight's session, so everybody will have a chance to go back and linger and pause and hear this again. In a moment, I'm going to play a short video clip that Bernie has provided. On the screen right now, you see the YouTube address, but maybe more importantly, you can see the title if you need to search it on YouTube. I'm going to play it now, and all of you should be able to hear it and view it. It could be that somebody somewhere has a slight drag on your end, or maybe your volume doesn't work. And if for some reason that doesn't work, just be patient with us. It'll be done in about 2 minutes, and we'll be talking and reflecting on it, and you can view the video when we're finished. So, Bernie, I'm going to go ahead and play it now.
My fingers are crossed.
Here we go.
Thomas Edison! Was it Nikola Tesla? We're gonna step up, you'll be shocked when I spit and start static. I'll rip your style and add it to my long list of bats. While you were busy digging ditches and burning bridges, I'm pumping out veggies, second riches, so go back to your pitches. You're a geek, plagued by OCD. You never had sex much as you're not screwed by me. I crush you, Tesla. There's just no putting it gently. I don't alternate my flow. I diss you directly. I see a universe of infinite energy, but no potential for threat. From the center music, you can call me Tesla. Nikola, impeccably dressed. Giving lessons in electrical nemesis. This will be on the test, so confess to your best and let the whole world know what the Serbian did for the wizard of Mendo. History is getting rewritten, and I read your best invention was a way to steal clay. The truth hurts you broke and washed out. Don't give a smidgen about your visions if they can't make a buck. I can just business. Understood things you never could. So dope that I even make New Jersey look good. I'm on the record, I invented. You got to there, I said it. I'll bet you $50,000 that you'll never forget it. Without me, here's a taste of what this battle would be. No lights, no camera, no sound. See? You fool, you think that you can touch me with this? You couldn't handle my guess with your greedy little mind. What's inside mine was ahead of its own time. You did not steal from me, you stole me from mankind. It's a wireless transmission of truth, and it's a shocking real story of a banker with you. And if the people knew you stopped me from making power free, they would curse the Con Edison with every utility. Oh, war! Yo, Johnson!
Bernie, that's got to be a mic drop.
Yeah, yeah. So can you hear me all right, Andy?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great. Yeah, I think we did pretty well on that. All things being considered, I apologize if it was there was a little bit of latency in the signal, but I hope everybody was able to appreciate it and do have a look at it again. It's a great video on YouTube. Now, like Inman, who does the oatmeal cartoon about Tesla, the epic rap guys get a few facts wrong. And for instance, one recurring claim is that it turns up all the time in Tesla, popular culture about Tesla, is that Edison stole inventions from Tesla. And indeed, as Tesla says to Edison in the video, so confess your thefts and let the whole world know what the Serbian did, meaning Tesla, for the Wizard of Menlo. Your best invention was a way to steal credit. Now, this really is kind of a myth, and there isn't a whole lot of truth to it. What I found in my research on working on Tesla is that when Tesla went to work for Edison in 1884 in Edison's laboratories in New York City, he was assigned the job of designing an arc lighting system, a lighting system for basically street lighting, and he worked on it. And while he was there, the Edison company, decided that they didn't need such a system, and they refused to pay Tesla the $50,000 that he thought he deserved. And as a result, Tesla quit. And one of my favorite original documents that I saw in the Tesla archives is a notebook that Tesla maintained while he was at the Edison Machine Works. And in the last page, just like one of our students would write in the back, he says, "Goodbye, Edison," with a big exclamation mark and lots of graffiti around it. But what happens afterwards is fairly interesting. Tesla quits the Edison organization and goes to work on his own, but he takes all of the ideas that he developed for that arc lighting system and he creates his own company and launches it in Rahway, New Jersey. So you could ask, who exactly was stealing from whom? Edison from Tesla, or vice versa? And I tend to think that this is not one of Tesla's finer moments where he walks off with all of this intellectual property that he developed while he was working for the Edison company. But let me emphasize that when we're talking about a piece of popular culture like this, it's not fair necessarily to hammer the epic rap video guys, Alquist and Shukoff, on historical details. As Inman pointed out in one interesting interview that he did, he said, "I'm a comedian and I speak in hyperbole and I exaggerate for the sake of comedy." And we need to keep that in mind when we look at a piece of popular culture. A lot of times it is a bit exaggerated in order to get the comic or the theatrical effects that they want to achieve. And the power of exaggeration certainly, makes us laugh and often makes us see things that we may not have noticed before. And for me, that's the power of this Tesla versus Edison video, which is it gives us a chance to see something new about invention. And this is in particular, I would argue that this video introduces an idea that Tesla and Edison had two very different styles of invention. And inventors, I'd like to suggest, have their own distinct way of choosing problems and working through solutions. And they're very much like artists. We expect artists to, paint in a way that is distinctive for themselves, like these two paintings that you see here. And inventors are very similar. And what we can see in this video is that Tesla and Edison had two very different approaches to invention. Now, Edison, always invented. The central feature of his style was to respond to the needs and wishes that people already had. And he always emphasized, and there's a quote from him, "Anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is proof of success." And indeed, right from the very beginning of Edison's career, his very first invention was an automatic voting machine, a machine that counted up votes if you were in Congress or in a state legislature. And he thought it was a great invention, but politicians quickly disabused him of that idea, because they said, look, that this gets rid of all the speeches and all the filibustering, and it's never going to sell. And Edison took that lesson to heart and never developed anything again that wasn't going to have an immediate or practical market. Probably the classic example of this is his electric lighting system that he developed in the late 1870s and early 1880s. With that system, Edison saw, when he was first starting out, that city dwellers, people living in places like New York, were already installing gas lights into their homes. And his big insight, I would argue, is he said, let me make an alternative to gas lighting that would fit right into people's lives, right into the fixtures, indeed into the very fixtures that they had in their houses, their gas fixtures. And his incandescent lamp was designed just for that purpose. If any of you ever have the chance to go to the restoration of Edison's laboratory at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, one of the things that you'll be surprised is the street lighting is all Edison incandescent lights, but the lights, when they first come on, glow very, very faintly. And I asked the curators when I was out there, and I said, why is that? And they said, well, don't you know, Edison's early incandescent lights were only 15 candle power. They were very, very dim. And the reason for that is he was directly modeling the basically the existing gas lighting system. For economists, the way we would talk about Edison's style or his approach was that it was market pull innovation, meaning that he was always designing his inventions to respond to what his customers wanted, that customers pulled his creative work in certain directions.
Hey, Bernie, let me
ask
you.
That's file. So let me. Bernie, that's a good. I was just looking over at the to see what kind of comments we had.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question myself, actually, and I'm going to go back a slide just to emphasize this.
Sure.
And I think partly what's intriguing to me is, and we talked about this a few nights ago when we hosted a webinar with NCHE on the patent office, and we worked with actually your colleague Maggie Nunley at UVA.
Right.
And we talked at least a little bit about the motivations of innovators rather than the outcome of innovations. In other words, and I see in red market pull, and immediately I imagine the entrepreneurial sort of making money aspect of inventing things. But I wonder if there are other motivations too, whether it's scientific curiosity, whether it's need, whether it's intrinsic, whatever that might be. In your mind, particularly this time period, how were innovations mostly? What were the genesis of many innovations, and in particular Edison and Tesla?
So as you'll see, Tesla has a different sort of set of motivations for what he wants to do. We'll get to that in a minute. But in answer to the general question about sort of, the time period that we're talking about, the Gilded Age, 1875 to 1900. What is motivating inventors? And this is a period where the number of patents jumps dramatically. I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but instead of hundreds of patents being filed each year as they were prior to the Civil War, the number jumps into the thousands and tens of thousands of patents every year. What motivates, I think, a lot of people is the fact that patent application process was compared to now fairly simple, fairly inexpensive, and people often patented products and ideas to launch small businesses. So I'd say that the entrepreneurial style of invention drove lots and lots of people to do that. Now, of course, if you look at patent models, you'll also see that a lot of times people basically patent something because they just have a design or they have a creation that they really just love. And if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell. So there's a sort of artistic aesthetic quality that's there as well. Students today often work on technology, at least my engineering students, not so much even because they're worried about whether their invention or their innovation is going to make money, but they are often concerned about whether it's going to be valuable to the community. I've got students that work in one of the civil engineering labs, and they're making a water purification device to be used in Africa in small villages, and their creativity is driven by, being valuable for those communities. So there's a lot of different reasons why inventors invent, but we tend to hold up Edison as a hero, to because that was the basically the kind of prevailing notion is that invention and technology was supposed to be successful in an economic sense. I see somebody asked the question, how did the intellectual property laws work back then? They worked in the sense that if you were the first person to come up with an idea, then you would get that idea, or you would get the patent for that idea. It could be a complicated process where you'd go back and forth with the patent examiners in the patent office in Washington, D.C. You might find yourself in court, battling with a rival inventor. But the examination process was what they called first to invent. What's interesting in our own time is this is only in the last 10 years ago has the American system shifted over to be more like the European system, where it's the rule is first to file. In other words, you may not be the inventor, but if you're the first person to file the paperwork for a patent for a new idea, then you get that patent. And people have a variety of views on that. I am not particularly a fan of first to file, but it means that the American intellectual property system today is in harmony with most of the rest of the world, which is a first to file system. So anyhow, but I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay, so Edison is to summarize what we were just saying, is always responding to the customer demand, thinking like a businessman. In contrast, Tesla is far less worried about the market for his inventions. He really is a theoretical inventor and an individual who really wants to come up with the perfect way to develop a new machine, or a new device. In other words, he'd get an idea and he would think about it and reflect on it and work on it in his imagination. And only when he had gotten it exactly right, as he emphasized in his interviews, would he actually then go and build it. He was also somebody who always saw that his inventions were going to be revolutionary. And in countless interviews, he's always portraying this amazing future that is going to be based on his electrical inventions. So Tesla represents a different approach to innovation, which economists would call knowledge push. That a new invention is the result of new ideas and discoveries that could happen in the laboratory, or be as a result of somebody being very skilled in a particular technology, and they go from that insight or that new piece of knowledge, and they push it out there towards the marketplace. And needless to say, knowledge push is fairly risky, and it often is expensive, and it is the sort of work that companies do when they have R&D labs. So in the heyday of AT&T and Ma Bell, when they had Bell Labs was extremely successful because it was a place where people did fundamental research and came up with new insights, such as how certain materials known as semiconductors worked in the 1940s, which led to the development of the transistor and ultimately to the integrated circuit. But if they weren't doing that fundamental research, discovering new things about those materials, then it wouldn't be possible to produce the modern electronics that we have today. So knowledge push is risky, it's expensive, but it's an important facet to the way innovation is done. But I want you to be thinking about that there are different ways of approaching invention. That's what this notion of style is about. So somebody asks, is Musk a knowledge push sort of guy? My feeling is Musk is actually, even though his company is named after Tesla, he's really probably more like Edison in that he is actually responding to the market opportunity and to understanding what customers are going to want, and particularly that there's a whole demand. Okay, but we've gotten a little bit confused here. We got to go. Am I driving the slides, or is Andy? Or are you driving the slides?
I'm not touching them, so yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what. Yeah. So yeah, I'm still not able to basically move these around, Andy. So we're
Okay,
we're about 6 slides ahead of where I need to be.
all right, let me back it up, and then you tell me.
I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going.
Yep.
Keep going. Nope. Yep. We want to go to the next one on Edison's industrial empire.
Okay, sorry about that, Bernie. Maybe I'm not sure what happened,
That's
but
okay.
I can always bail you out.
I know. I appreciate that. It's good to have a co-pilot on this. Okay. And somebody pointed out, what is Steve Jobs? And I think that's probably right. I would tend to say, Christy, that Steve Jobs was more of a market push sort of individual. In other words, most of the technologies that Apple has developed really existed beforehand, ahead of the iPod. There were MP3 players. Certain of the technologies that are embodied in the iPhone were developed by other companies, and what he did is he really packaged them in ways that customers responded to them. So. Okay, so let me go back to Edison. Edison, throughout his career, stayed close to the business side of invention and launched an entirely long series of companies to manufacture his lamps, his phonographs, his movies, and his storage batteries. And indeed, by the 1920s, he had an entire industrial empire located in West Orange, New Jersey, and most of those buildings that you see in this black and white photograph have disappeared. If you see the little water tank in the almost dead center, his laboratory were a few low-story buildings that were just to the left of that, but all of those other gigantic buildings, including the one that says West Orange on the roof, were where he manufactured his many different products. And what's interesting is that we tend to think of Edison as the inventor, but he was actually his work was at the center of an industrial empire, and this picture really captures that well. As the epic rap battle guys talk, in there they say, they have the Edison character saying, "I'm pumping out inventions and I'm stacking riches." And Tesla, by contrast, in the back to the video, is presented as being a very otherworldly sort of individual, not particularly concerned about manufacturing his inventions. And many people come to the conclusion then that Tesla was a bad businessman, that he really didn't have a business strategy, a plan for how he was going to make money off of his inventions. And one of the things that I learned in working and studying Tesla's career is that he really actually had a business strategy, and he wasn't interested in setting up manufacturing companies. He preferred a strategy that I called patent, promote, and sell. So he would make sure that he got strong patents on his inventions, and he would then promote them. He would do great lectures. He'd do newspaper interviews. He would engage the public in a variety of ways. And when the excitement for his new invention just had kind of reached a crescendo, a peak, he'd sell out to investors or entrepreneurs who could then go and build the company around his technology. And this was how he, was a success in his early career with his alternating current motor. He got the strong patents. He then promoted it through a series of lectures and exciting demonstrations. And then when everybody was at a fever pitch, he sold basically the intellectual property to George Westinghouse. And this patent strategy is still pursued by a variety of entrepreneurs today in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. That major innovators often today don't necessarily create companies, but indeed what they actually do is they sell out to venture capitalists or other people who then build up the entire company. So, and I'm glad that it's always important to be comparing what I'm saying. I'm talking about, I know, two dead white guys, and Hedy Lamarr is a wonderful contrast to somebody who, to a woman who was an extremely creative inventor in a very complex area, and a lot of Hedy Lamarr's work on communications technology is still at the basis of some of the ways we manage signals that are coming to and from your cell phone. So, but let me get back to our story here and to the epic rap videos. And so, you can ask, what else is going on in this video? In other words, I sort of suggested that, it challenges history versus myth, that it also raises that there are different approaches to invention, different things that motivate inventors. That Edison is much more of a business guy. Tesla is more of a visionary and an idealist. But what else is going on here? And I would suggest that what's really actually very interesting about this video is it sets up a series of powerful dichotomies that pit Edison and Tesla against each other, and those dichotomies can kind of be teased out as greed versus virtue, dirty deeds versus pure ideals, ordinary technology versus revolutionary technology, and indeed commerce versus art. And as I was going over my notes for this, I was reminded that you could even throw in the whole notion of bureaucracy and corporations with the individual and charisma. But let's talk about these dichotomies for a moment. Edison is certainly portrayed in this video and increasingly in popular culture as the villain, and I find that very, very interesting as a cultural historian, because when I first got into the business of writing about inventors in the late 1970s, Edison was seen as a great American hero. And indeed, the Smithsonian, in 1979, the 100th anniversary of the electric light, redid its exhibit halls in the National Museum of History with a focus on Edison. And indeed, the Lighting the Revolution exhibit is still there, celebrating Edison as a hero. And it's quite a contrast from the 1970s or even earlier. When Edison dies in 1931, people talk about the fact that they ought to be, that the February 11th, which is Edison's birthday, should have become a national holiday. And so Edison has undergone this really sort of profound change from being this sort of exemplar of American virtue and American ingenuity to being seen as a greedy bastard. And that certainly is the case in this video, where he is seen as someone who is ruthless and will do whatever he needs to get ahead, and that includes stealing ideas and crushing people like Tesla. Well, then that's what he's going to do. And this follows with the fact that people then point out as the video, and I know that it's in some cases it wouldn't be appropriate for certain classes, that the video makes reference to the fact that animals were killed at Edison's laboratory in West Orange during the battle of the currents between AC and DC. Edison was promoting DC, Tesla and Westinghouse were promoting AC, and the video shows Edison electrocuting this poor dog in the video. And and while that is, that's the case, that's also not entirely accurate. So we need Andy to go to the next slide, if we could, please. Okay, Edison did not himself electrocute any dogs or any animals at his laboratory. Those demonstrations were done by another individual, a man named Harold Brown, who had his own personal vendetta against Westinghouse and was loosely affiliated by the Edison Company, and it proved to be convenient for Brown and for the Edison organization to, let Brown kind of go on and do these demonstrations. And Brown argued that, in fact, hanging should be eliminated as the way to do capital punishment in New York, in the state of New York, and the state of New York, encouraged by Brown, basically introduced the electric chair as the preferred mode of capital punishment. But an important fact alert, which just is all over the internet, is people regularly sort of accuse Edison of being such a mean person because he electrocuted an elephant named Topsy at Coney Island in 1903. Now, Edison did not electrocute Topsy. A carnival barker that was working out of Coney Island did it as a publicity stunt. The connection with Edison is simply that the Edison Motion Picture Company got wind that this fellow was going to do this, he was going to electrocute the elephant, and they decided to make a movie about it. Topsy, as this picture or this newspaper clipping shows, was I'm sorry to say, a bad elephant. It was an elephant that had been mistreated, and it actually had killed several people, several handlers, and they came to the conclusion, as we probably would painfully might have to do today, that the elephant needed to be put down before it harmed itself or harmed anybody else.
And so, Bernie, I just want to emphasize this for Mike, who I can see his eyebrows go up. Mike says that he was under the impression that much of what Brown did was encouraged by Edison. Is this not true?
It's basically the Edison organization was in favor of letting Brown do his experiments, but I wouldn't say that this was a deliberate plan on the part of Edison himself. And that's how I would interpret it. And it is something that I feel that I've worked on and other people worked on, but it's never really been, I don't think it's gotten the treatment that it has. It continually is sensationalized. But I'd be careful. I mean, yes, Brown promoted DC on behalf of Edison, but it was these guys each had their own agenda. So
thank you.
Anyhow, yes. So I'm sorry about. Yes, I agree with Christy. Rest in peace, poor Topsy. Yes, and shame on those people for doing that. But it's important to pay it. Get students to do the research and pay attention to the facts. And that in this day and age, mythically, because we've decided that Edison was not a nice person, then we go and we reconstruct things like the episode with Topsy for to support our views. Okay.
Confirmation bias.
Right. Yes. And Susie's right that we have to again, that's an important point, which is we have our views today and we can't necessarily project those back on people, but that's where the interesting conversations are for our students. Okay, we're moving on as somebody else asks. Okay. All right. So, but for the epic rap guys, the most damning evidence in support of this unequal dichotomy that Edison is the bad guy and Tesla is the good guy has to do with the conspiracy that supposedly Edison conspired with J.P. Morgan, the famous bank financier, Wall Street banker, to foil Tesla's plans to distribute power for free, which Tesla planned to do by transmitting it through the earth at his laboratory on the North Shore of Long Island. And the lower picture shows you the laboratory and his famous tower. And the energy wasn't transmitted via the tower itself, but via a shaft that went 120 feet down underneath the tower, and Tesla pumped energy down into the earth, hoping that he could then send electrical signals all over the earth and people could pick them up. And it was a complicated plan. There are Tesla experts that still think it should be feasible. There are other folks that basically tell you why it would not necessarily work. But it was a brilliant idea, but it's complicated. The building, by the way, the low one-story building on the left is what is being restored as a Tesla museum today by a group of people out on Long Island, and Elon Musk gave them $1 million to restore that building. But back to the video, as Tesla tells Edison, it's a wireless transmission of truth. And it's a shocking real story of a banker and you, meaning Edison. And if the people knew you stopped me from making power free, they would curse the Con Edison with every utility. And I think that's a great line. Now, while Edison is being presented as the villain, Tesla is being presented in the video as the flaky visionary, the geek plagued by OCD, who invents for the good of humanity, but who dies broke. And it is true. He's at the end of his life, his only friends really were pigeons that he fed in a park behind the New York Public Library in Manhattan. And in the video, as you saw, with lightning flying from his fingertips, Tesla thunders at Edison. My favorite line in the video: "You did not steal from me. You stole me from mankind." And I really do really love that line. So we're clearly, in this rap video, supposed to see Edison as the villain and Tesla as the good guy or the martyr. And that Edison's relentless pursuit of profits crushes the charisma of Tesla's artistry. And that's what I mean by there's a dichotomy between commerce and art. Now, such polarizations are often, great for popular culture. That you need good versus evil to make a great Disney movie. You need like as the image shows there, you need the virtuous Snow White, and you need the evil queen. And that that popular culture, whether it's movies, comic books, or video games, always have to have this tension between these sort of exaggerated characters. But we should keep in mind that such exaggerations, while they're great entertainment, should not necessarily tell us how we should think about technology in our own lives or in society. And that it isn't really entirely a choice, I would argue, between Edison or Tesla, but that indeed, the success of American society, of American economy, is much about the fact that you need both kinds of inventors. You need some Teslas, and you need some Edisons. So why do we need more Teslas, and by extension, other individuals along those lines? We need them because they look beyond the existing needs and markets to create new technologies and new technologies that alter our both routine business practices. They're the technologies that individuals like Tesla come up with, create new industries, new opportunities, and they enrich and improve our lives. And so we've come to expect that their technologies are going to come along periodically, like say the automobile in the 20th century, the automobile, the airplane, the computer, the atomic bomb. Maybe not the atomic bomb, but that we are going to have these technologies that are really going to change our lives. And men and women like Tesla are the sources of those new technologies, and they provide what the economist Joseph Schumpeter argued is at the very heart of capitalism, a process of creative destruction. That new things are created, they grow, they prosper, they mature, and then that technology is wiped out by the next technology, the next set of business practices that came along. As a biographer, I tell you that Tesla pursued disruptive technology, I think, out of a real personal need, that he had to, that in order to make sense of his own life, his inner emotional life was fairly complicated and often in turmoil, and that when he was able to invent something and make the world, make his inventions work, kind of impose order, something in his laboratory, then I think he felt more secure and more settled. And lots the pictures project him as this calm, rational individual, like this photograph here, where his mind is making sense of things, and that is a giant antenna in the back that he used in his experiments with wireless power. So anyhow. But that's why we need more Teslas. We need them to come up with those brilliant ideas that really create new industries, and in some ways often disrupt the old order. But at the same time, Andy, get ahead of myself here. Sorry about that. One more. There we go. Do we need just as many Edisons? Yeah, I think we do. And for every time you have an Edison, you need to have some hard-headed business people. Edison is one example, Henry Ford is another, Bill Gates is a third, who take the radical new inventions and figure out how to manufacture and market them to millions of people. So let's just take the personal computer for a moment. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak developed the first really genuinely practical personal computer, as they say, that was going to be for the masses. And they develop it and they get it up to a certain point, but it is Jobs at Microsoft, drawing partly on what he learned because his father, he's Bill Gates Jr. His father was Bill Gates Sr., who was an executive at IBM. And through what he knew through his family and through his understanding of the computer industry, Gates basically drove down the cost of computers so that they could become widely available. No Gates, you wouldn't have a computer on every desk, or we'd have the expectation that we should make them available to our students. And a lot of times, these figures that are the hard-headed business people, like Edison or like Gates, or like Henry Ford, are not necessarily pleasant people. And they can have a dark side, as we've seen with Edison, or as people well know with Henry Ford. But at the end of the day, we may not love them, but we need them. To underline kind of what I'm getting at with, needing Edison's and Tesla's both to make the economy work, I like to show students this particular picture, which is based on the work of a Soviet or Russian economist in the 1920s named Kondratieff. And Kondratieff basically argued that partly inspired by the ideas of Joseph Schumpeter, that there are cycles, there are ups and downs in economic history, and you see that there is a series of peaks, which in this particular format are shown as the first wave, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, on to the sixth wave, and that they really map onto important basic technologies, like the second one, which from 1830 to 1880 is the railroad and steel. And that technology peaks, and then the economy goes into a recession or a depression, and then a new technology comes along, lifts the economy out, and lifts it to a higher level. And what I want to emphasize is guys like Tesla are often the people that launch one of those new waves. So take that third wave for electrification and chemicals from 1880 to 1930. You get started on that wave because someone like Tesla comes along with a new sort of technology, alternating current. It takes inventors like Edison, who continually improve the technology to basically have it grow and reach that particular peak, and then you can have a trough, and a new set of inventors create disruptive technologies and launch you again. And so this is a way of getting our students to think about, that you really need a mix. Who's going to, basically, get you started on one of those waves and carry you forward, and who's going to sustain it. And what's an important thing is for any of our students is to realize that nobody knows what the next wave is going to be like. Okay, after the financial crisis, and now I'm on the far right of the diagram, of 2007 to 2009, we are kind of waiting around for the next big wave. And what is it going to be? Is it going to be environmental technology? Is it going to be healthcare? Is it going to be something that is related to new materials such as nano materials? We don't really know. But our students are going to be the folks that are going to bring on that next wave, and that's really part of our ideology. We believe that the change is going to come, and that change is going to be driven by technology. And again, that's in one of the ways. It's one of the messages that's underlying this overall diagram. So I'm going to pause here. I see Angela has written a very thoughtful comment, and see if I can pick up on and answer that.
So let's take a minute to look at Angela's question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Angela, for taking a few moments. She writes, corporations and tech companies exercise a tremendous amount of power these days, perhaps to the detriment of democracy. Does this perhaps explain why Tesla is getting more play in pop culture these days, this idea that the inventor scientist can bring an ethical dimension to tech and science?
Absolutely. I think that it's what's really interesting, again, is, as I suggested, is 40 years ago, Edison would have been the hero, and today Tesla is the hero. And I think part of it is we really like to have technology that is not seemingly always controlled by a large corporation, that it could be produced by an individual, by a hero. I think we also are concerned that that when the economy is down, we tend to look for major saviors that come out of nowhere to bail us out. And I think that's also why Steve Jobs is so popular today. We want that sort of prophet or visionary to come along and help us out. So I completely agree with that today, and it's also a generational thing. Our students are very different than they, I've been teaching college students for 30 years, and they're the students I have today are very different than the ones that I had, when I first started. Students back then wanted to go, as they would jokingly say, to go to work for General Motors, or as they would say, Generous Mother. And today, students are like, I'm going to save the world. I want to make a difference. I want my technology, I want my creations to make for a better community. And so their ethics has indeed, as Angela says, has really changed. They have a very different set of expectations and values.
I think that's a fantastic point, and it also, I think, contextualizes some of these events that we put on a timeline, but you have to see that sort of generational culture around it.
That's right, exactly, and that we some of us, our grandparents or our parents, lived through let's say that third wave of electrification and chemicals, or they were around when the automobile was introduced, and they saw, basically saw, almost, all positive outcomes from those things. Whereas, another generation growing up in the 1960s and 1970s saw the limits of technology and saw the environmental hazards that were caused. So I think that this is an important thing. And again, back to styles. Our creative children, our creative teenagers get to choose. They get to decide whether they want to be more of an Edison or more of a Tesla, and that it's going to be some mix of those two personality styles or types. It's going to be important. So I want to see Pollyann writes, I used to teach third grade and the benchmark advanced program and included selections on Edison, and I teach fifth grade now. Is Edison a Tesla, or is Edison or Tesla a topic? I'm not sure quite what you mean, but I think that they're getting students to think about both of them is a good thing to do. And
just to jump in, I do also think that even if Tesla or Edison isn't a specific part of the standard, and it depends obviously what state you're in and sort of the expectations of your curriculum, I think what you're suggesting here, and what I'm really thankful and grateful that you did by structuring this against the rap video, is that if Edison is the only name in the standards you might be teaching, then setting him against Tesla is a really important way of teaching Edison, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I guess I'd throw out to the audience, and is there a certain amount of literacy that we want to do around things like a rap video, where we don't want our students to just sort of take it as is, but look and sort of mine it for certain ideas and values and beliefs. And that to me is a real interesting opportunity. I should tell you that that one of the most popular books, I don't have a way to actually check this, but a few years ago, one of the best-selling books from Scholastic Books was a comic book by Rav Mahuta, who's an Indian American, meaning he's from South Asia, and he wrote a very interesting comic book about Tesla, which is apparently used in all sorts of different middle school classes. Sometimes it's used in social studies, sometimes it's used in the English class to look at the plot structure and all of that, and it's a very powerful tool where the kids do learn they learn a little bit of technology, they learn a little bit of science, but they also learn how the story should be told. And so I see the rap video as a way of doing that. And and it is, I hope, an interesting hook that they gets kids to think about, as Tammy says, what's going to come next, and what the next big thing should be. And it could absolutely be sort of a project with that, and there may even be some interesting sort of role playing for students to take, which is somebody is proposing the big disruptive invention. At the same time, then what has to happen next? What are the manufacturing, marketing, business challenges? So. And Justin has provided some very good PTO resources, and I should say, along with behind that PTO website, there is actually a team of instructional or educational specialists at the USPTO whose real specialty is actually to help teachers develop both history and science-based lesson plans about American technology.
Excellent. Thank you, Bernie.
Good. So in to wind up, you know, I want to make the argument. I mean, the rap video guys asked the question, who won? You know, was Edison the winner or Tesla the winner? And I'd argue that, you know, that America is the winner because we have in our society been able to both promote Edison-like characters and Tesla-like characters, and that each of them made valuable contributions to our economy and society. And it's our loss if we demonize one person and we make the other one into a hero. That we need to be able to recognize this really interesting tension, which is the juice of history of dynamics between personalities. And so that's what I'd like to leave you with, and hope that it becomes something that folks can utilize in a variety of classroom settings.
That's fantastic. Bernie, I'd like to ask you just a couple of closing questions, and I'm also going to invite our audience to consider any final questions that they might give you.
Yeah.
My question for you, Bernie, is, you know, we have the benefit of hindsight, we have the benefit of context. We're now in a position of being able to take these kinds of viral communications and use them in our classrooms. At the time, how much were Edison and Tesla, and how much was the general American public aware of the verses between their two names?
For the most part, I think that people were well aware of both of them. They were regular fodder or regularly covered in the newspapers at the time. And you have to remember that this is a period, really a golden age of American newspapers, where newspapers, you know, basically developed as tabloids, and cost you know, 1 or 2 cents, you know, for each issue. So plenty of newspapers are out there, and they provided coverage. A lot of times, you know, we tend to think of Edison as the Wizard of Menlo Park, when in reality, certain of the headlines always started the two wizards, and they would talk about both Edison and Tesla. Wouldn't necessarily draw out some of the distinctions that I drew out here tonight, but they would talk about both of them as being important electrical figures in the electrical industry that were reshaping American life. And whenever anything came up about it of a scientific or technical nature, the reporters would trot out to one of the two laboratories and ask Edison, what do they think about this? Or go to Tesla and say, what do you think about that? And, you know, both of them were eager to, you know, sort of hold forth in the papers, you know, about science, technology, and you know, and the future.
Thank you. That's a really great question, and I'm wondering too, Bernie, you know, you've written a book about Tesla. How was your book received? What kinds of feedback did you get, and in particular, what kind of feedback did you get that was critical?
Sure. So the book was published in 2013, and I've been very fortunate that it's appeared in a variety of formats, paperback, electronic, and an audio edition in English. It's also been translated into 8 foreign languages, not surprisingly, both Serbian and Croatian, given that Tesla was born to a Serbian family but grew up in what is today modern-day Croatia. And the response that I've gotten a lot of times is that, you know, in the reviews, or if you look at the comments on Amazon.com, is people, you know, there are some people that get it and they really appreciate that the book tries to be a measured assessment of Tesla. You know, what did he get right? What did he get wrong? Kind of, you know, I argue that his personality traits, what made him a success, also were his greatest strengths were also his greatest weaknesses. And I really tried to, sort of trace that out. What made his career go up also contributed to how it had, how he had a downfall, how his second half of his life was very difficult. And there are people that get that, and there are people that are very appreciative about the technology, and then there are people that go, this is way too much technology. And my answer is to that is to sort of say, so if you bought a book about a famous artist, I just wrote an essay on the sculptor Alexander Calder, and you bought a book about Calder or another famous artist, and they didn't talk about his or her famous paintings or works of art, would you be satisfied? And for me, if you're going to talk about an inventor, you have to be willing to talk about the details of their technology, and that tends to be an interesting thing, which is people want all personality and no technology.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've got a couple of questions that are queuing up, and one of them is a follow-up.
Help me out here.
Is from Tammy, who asks, did you get any feedback from anyone in the tech industry on your book?
Yeah, so I've given actually lectures on the book, and at both Microsoft and at Google, and in both cases they were very interested. In what was sort of at Microsoft, and again they're very interested in the creative personalities and what are the traits that lend themselves to people being creative and being effective. So the folks in the industry are along those lines. I have to say that if you don't have time or you want your students not to have to go through the whole book, when I did the lecture at Google, they did a very good version of it, video version of the lecture that they put on YouTube. And if you Google Carlson Tesla on YouTube, that should come up. It's about 45 minutes, and that's that's one of the things, so that's the thing. And so there's a very practical question. I'm going back up, Andy, here. I've got to grab it. Mike asks, is there any evidence of other industrialists who were bidding for Tesla's alternating current? Basically, it's hard to tell very specifically whether or not, because Edison's business backers basically kept sort of saying to Westinghouse, if you don't buy the technology, we do have someone from San Francisco who's going to buy it. And I could never decide whether that was they were blowing smoke or whether there really was somebody else waiting in the wings. I can tell you that there were really sort of three big companies in the late 1880s in the electrical industry. One was Westinghouse, another was Edison, and a third was a company that I did a lot of work on when I first got into the history business. In the company's called Thomson Houston, and the Thomson Houston company and the Edison company were really not interested in Tesla's technology. And the Thomson Houston company basically said, if we're going to have alternating current, we'll develop it using our own inventors and our own talent. And so, of the three biggies, Westinghouse was the most likely company to do it. Westinghouse was also the smallest of those three giant companies at the time. This is the late 1880s, and it needed the new technology more than the other companies. So it's an interesting kind of counterfactual, which is would somebody else have snapped up the Tesla technology? I suspect yes, but Tesla was very lucky that Westinghouse bought it. So yeah,
excellent. I wonder if there are any other questions from our audience for Bernie.
Right. Yeah. I have to say that, in answer to Susie's comment about the commercial with Alexander Graham Bell, where he's in the theater and his phone goes off and he answers it, ahoy, ahoy. That's actually how Alexander Graham Bell thought you were supposed to answer the phone. He did not use the phrase that we use, hello, hello. And then he goes on, if you listen to it, and he says, no, you wanted number 2. I'm phone number 1. And I love that part. It's great. It's the true send up of Alexander Graham Bell. or true, it's a fun representation of him. Okay, yeah. So.
And Sherry asked, did Tesla mentor any specific or known inventors?
Now that's also another interesting question, which is there are, back to Edison for a moment. I know I'm going to ask questions about Tesla. A number of inventors, and successful engineers passed through Edison's laboratory on their way to, careers in their own right. Tesla tended, and again, it's part of his style. He didn't have a big team of researchers. He probably at the most had, say, 3 or 4 machinists helping him in the laboratory, but he did not have a big team. And he really did prefer to work alone, and that was his style. So he didn't really mentor a whole lot. A man named he'll come to me. Lita Forst basically, got his degree in physics, PhD in physics from Yale, and multiple times tried to convince he wanted to work on radio. And DeForest tried several times to convince Tesla to take him on as an assistant, and Tesla refused. DeForest went on to have his own interesting career, including being the one of the inventors of the vacuum tube.
Great. Well, Bernie, you've shared a whole lot with us tonight, and it looks like we have here's a couple more slides for you. Here's the book that I think some folks asked for. Yeah. So there's details on the book, and and you can see a couple of the foreign language editions. I'm still waiting on the Russian edition. I'm not sure. Maybe I've irritated Vladimir Putin. Who knows? And I have a feeling you did.
That's the one I haven't done. Yeah. That's all right. So, but it was great fun. Yeah.
Well, Bernie, I want to thank you again.
And again,
go ahead, Bernie.
No, you go.
I just wanted to thank you again for joining us tonight and leading this provocative conversation. I always enjoy hearing your voice and hearing your insights. You'll be joining us again for some future webinars with the National Humanities Center and the National Council for History Education. But I think what might be even more important to emphasize to everyone in the attendees list is that you also do this in person. And so they should check out the NCHE website and see how they can sign up for one of the remaining 3 colloquia in the 2018-19 school year. Thanks, Bernie.
Absolutely, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope it was a bit of fun, and but also gave you some ideas about how to talk about technology's impact in American history. By all means, email me at UVA, and I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions. But otherwise, please, everybody, have a very good and safe night, and enjoy the Labor Day weekend.
Thanks so much, Bernie. And I think in some ways tonight's first webinar of the upcoming series is a great summary of the way that all of our webinars will go, which is that we very much want a scholar to lead a conversation, for you to ask the questions, and for the associated PowerPoints to be helpful and relevant for your classroom. All of our sessions are recorded, and you will have access to this PowerPoint. And I love the way that Bernie structured most of his presentation tonight around responding to or annotating the video clip itself. So what a powerful thing to be able to do in your own classroom is to show the video and then to have these kinds of bulleted points to pull them out and to ask your students either individually or in groups to try to make sense of the lyrics of that video. I want to thank everyone again for joining us. I also want to invite you to follow the National Humanities Center on our social media feeds. We have a very active Twitter and Facebook and Instagram account. This is a great place to see updates on upcoming events, as well as register and sign up for the currently scheduled events. I also want to encourage you to go to our website and sign up for our fall webinar series. I can tell you that most of our sessions are in the back 20% of capacity. So I would really encourage you to go and sign up soon. And now, don't forget that tonight you will receive a certificate for attending tonight's session. Once you complete the survey, you will receive a link that allows you to download this. And I very much hope to see all of you again at our next webinar, September the 11th. We'll be working with Jevin West from the University of Washington in Seattle. Jevin's actually in the science field, and he's done much of his work around calling BS, around understanding and being able to critically analyze information. And so we've asked him to really add and consider a humanities-inspired data reasoning session. And we will be really talking about and thinking about misinformation and about half-truths, and dare I say, even fake news. We'll be doing it through this lens of humanities-inspired data reasoning. So we would love to see you there. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. We hope to see you again at the Humanities in Class webinar series in 2 weeks. Good night.